Today, I want to talk about insanity, not the legal definition. I want to talk about what people perceive to be sane and insane behaviors. Carl Jung once said, "Show me a sane man and I'll cure him for you." And there's that quote that people say is from Albert Einstein, but it hasn't been confirmed, where they say the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and hoping for a different result. To be honest, I think insanity could be described as believing in things that aren't true, or having false hopes and false dreams, false perceptions of the way the world really is. So if we look at insanity this way, then we really need to look at what influences people's thinking, what makes them believe things that just aren't that way in reality. I spoke to Shining Light, as I do most days, and we touched on the subject of the backfire effect. Now, the backfire effect is a psychological phenomenon. When a person is presented with factual evidence to dispute their deepest convictions, whereas you would think that person would change their beliefs, in fact, they look for confirmation bias and become more deeply entrenched in their convictions. And we see this when we speak to people, when we debate people, when we argue with people. Even if they speak rationally in a debate, if that debate challenges their deepest held convictions and beliefs, they will search for confirmation bias to protect what they believe in, and they will reject vehemently all skepticism. So if we look at this backfire effect, this phenomenon, then we can see that people really don't think rationally. And when people are presented with facts, a lot of them really don't want to hear it. They will refuse to listen, even if it's something that could potentially destroy their life. Now, this is what I find to be insane behavior. It's almost like the comparison we make when we tell people not to play with the fire. We tell people how dangerous something can be, but they'll do it anyway, because they don't believe it's dangerous, no matter how much evidence you present them with. You can call it stubbornness or rigid thinking, any number of things, but what causes this to happen? One of the things I'm being asked to do in my studies is reflect. Reflect on your progress, reflect on how you learn, reflect on how you react, how you think. Look at the emotions you experience when you're told certain things, when you're challenged. And in that respect, you become your own therapist. You start to study yourself, you start to study your own mind. And it's more than just mindfulness. It's more than just being aware. You start to question why you do these things, why you think these things. So if you become angry, or if you become stubborn in your thinking, you say, why? What made me do that? What triggered that thought? What triggered that emotion? And in that respect, you can undo some of the insanity, some of the irrational thinking. So if we look at the influences people have on our thinking, on our behavior, people all around, all day, every day, people coerce, people even threaten, people ridicule and shame, people pull all sorts of tricks and try all sorts of games to get you to behave in a certain way that fits in with what makes them comfortable. And if you don't do that, they reject you, or they bully you, or they laugh at you. It's all manipulation. So again, if we look at the way we react to the things people say, whether we accept it and take it on board without even questioning the validity of what they say, where do we get our information from? You know, there are so many people who get their information from YouTube, and it shows. It really shows. They'll watch one video about conspiracy theories, or they'll watch one video about atheism, and that's it. You know, suddenly they've had a revelation, and they don't question any of it. They don't do research, and I mean real research. Not just reading a couple of Psychology Today articles, or looking at a couple of science blogs or websites. That's not thorough research. And I wonder how many people allow themselves to be manipulated by the voices they hear and the people who speak on these YouTube channels. I also wonder how many of these channels believe the hype when they gain a lot of subscribers. People are normally pretty good in the comments sections. They'll call people out and they'll question things. But there are those who will blindly follow and blindly take on the information without questioning it. And although these people are easily led and vulnerable to manipulation, they are all around us, day in, day out, all over social media, speaking and acting out and influencing other people. So back to the point of what is sanity and what is insanity. Well, many of you may or may not know, there was a time when I was once deemed by the authorities to be in need of help or insane. And the reason for this was life circumstances. They tend to break you down, and they cause a crisis, like an emotional crisis, where you have far too many things going on at once. You really struggle to cope. You really have to sit down and take stock, and your mind is buzzing. There's like a high frequency, non-stop chatter in your mind, and there's no respite. And I think what causes this is the outside influences of other people manipulating and taking advantage of you, trying to break you, all trying to take a piece of you. And when they see that you might be willing to help, or that you've got a kindness in your nature, they will exploit that. They will seek to exploit that. And then the problem comes when these people have taken what they wanted from you. They're nowhere to be seen, and they've gone. Or they might possibly think there's more to be had, so they stick around and they keep piling on the pressure for you to provide what they need and give them their supply. When these people keep on and they drain you emotionally, drain you of all your energy, that's when you break, when you snap. If there's too many of these people in your life. I'll tell you a funny story. I got to this point once. They tried to section me in one of those mental homes, and they locked me in a room. They wouldn't let me out unless I signed the paperwork. And of course, I've got responsibilities in real life. I was well aware of that. And I said to them, no, there's no way I can come to that place and not fulfill my responsibilities. What they didn't understand was that wouldn't help me at all, because who would pay my rent? Who would do my work? Who would pay my bills? Nobody. And I would come out and it would be like coming out of prison. Everything's gone, everything's fucked. You know, plus the fact I've got a child. I've got responsibilities. But these people were adamant that they were going to lock me up, take me to their loony bin, They were in and out for hours, locking the door. I looked at the window was locked. And in the end, they came in, tried to get me to sign this paperwork, and they left again. But this time the door was open. They didn't lock it. And the reason why they didn't lock it was because the whole building was locked. Everybody had gone home. So I crept out of the room and had a look around. And there was nobody, apart from one cleaner. So I said to the cleaner, "I've just delivered a parcel and they've locked me in the building, I can't get out." And she showed me to a fire exit. So of course I went out the fire exit and they chased me to my vehicle. And I got in my vehicle and I drove away back to my house. And within half an hour the police turned up. And the policeman came in and I spoke to him and I explained all the problems I'd had, all the things that had happened, and how I was trying to fix everything. He wasn't actually a bad person to speak to, and he was well aware of the fact that he couldn't forcefully section me in my own house. For some reason they can't do that legally. And he could relate. He actually told me about a time he got stabbed on duty. And he was the same. He sat there and he questioned life, and he questioned himself, the way he was reacting, the way he'd been treated by people, and he shut himself away and became isolated. This relates closely to learned helplessness. And if you look at Thorndike and Skinner, you'll see how it correlates in their experiments. But it does get to a point where a person, if their rewards are taken away, or if they're punished every time they try to perform an action, they become withdrawn. And eventually they will just sit there and give up. There's no motivation, there's no reason to try or carry on. And this is called learned helplessness. It can be reversed. It can be reversed very quickly, but they have to reintroduce the rewards. They have to reintroduce an incentive, a reason to carry on. I honestly think that when a person has been punished and punished, right through childhood or through adulthood, if they suffer too many injustices, or they're discriminated against heavily, everything they own is taken away, they're emotionally tortured and just repeatedly broken, then they become incapable of functioning. And I don't think they're insane. I don't think they've gone mad. I just think they've reached that crisis point. That's when these institutions want to label that person as insane and throw them away, lock them up. Of course, there's a great deal of mental illnesses out there, and we've got dangerous psychopaths. We've got lots of people with mental illnesses who need to be shut away because they are dangerous, because they've got no empathy, they've got no concept of the harm that they could potentially do to others. But when we look at your average man who gets sectioned, who gets put on antidepressants and these drugs, it could be said that it's society's problem. Society creates insanity in people. The crazy stuff on TV, the things people see and absorb from social media, and the effect it has on their mind. All I can think is, if we keep things in check, keep things in balance, and stay away from these toxic people, these people who seek to manipulate, and these people who seek to control and coerce your actions and exploit you until there's nothing left, that's when you end up in this state of apathy. That's when you'll end up in a complete emotional and mental crisis, and you won't be able to cope. So the last point I want to make really is, there's a lot of nonsense being spoken by people And again, it's people who haven't experienced the things they're trying to reference. And again, that could be said to be a form of insanity. I mean, why would you imagine how something is in the real world and then say it with such conviction and offer that as advice to people when you haven't experienced it? That is insane, and anyone who listens and follows that advice is equally as insane. But getting back to the point, what some people don't realize is these relationships, people are so emotionally charged. People take leave of their senses and they lose touch with reality. They really do. And nobody's taken into account these honeymoon periods. You know, there's lots of people out there saying, well, I've got a girlfriend and she's not too bad. It seems to be working out. But don't they always? Don't they always in that first 6 months when you're hiding the worst personality traits you possess? And you know the practiced manipulators, the narcissists out there, they seek people out and they covertly cover up their intentions until it's too late. And then they start to systematically take you apart until you reach that point where they've completely stripped you down. And they do it with the aid of the police, and they do it with the aid of the courts, and they strip you down until there's nothing left. And they go one step further. Once they've ruthlessly ground you down to nothing, they get a sadistic pleasure from seeing you stay there. And they will do everything they can for their own amusement to keep you there. And we see this with parental alienation. You know, we see this with the divorce courts and the extraction of money for years and years. These people, they come around, and at first they may appear to have good intentions, but soon they begin to extract everything they need from you, and they rinse you out until there's nothing left. And when there's nothing left, then they ridicule, they shame, they punish, and they get sadistic pleasure out of seeing you in that position. And they really enjoy the power they feel that they've been able to actually do this to someone. And they will use all means at their disposal. You know, the police, the courts, everything. They will use stupid men who are willing to carry out violence by proxy or wrongful arrest and false imprisonment. And at the end of it, you'll see a man who is broken. And for that man to fix himself, there's only one way for that man to fix himself. And that's for him to remove himself from the company of those sorts of people. And for him to really look at the effects of the things people say and the things people do. Look at the way he reacts and reflect on why this is happening. And then make the necessary changes to make sure that it doesn't happen again.